I interviewed the great actor Billy Bob Thornton just a couple years ago, and he told this interesting story about a coincidence. This is basically a part of an interview that Paul Giamatti and I did with Billy Bob, and it's on our old podcast, Chinwag, so go check it out if you want to hear it. But Billy Bob told me this interesting story about that he and his daughter were big fans of music, and when she was younger, they would drive around like the canyons, I guess, of California, and they would listen to music, and he would sort of tell her things about music. And Billy Bob's a very accomplished drummer and musician himself, so he was educating his daughter. Makes sense. You know, they were sort of sharing a general love of the Beatles, and they would always be listening to the Beatles on like satellite radio. And he'd be talking about, this is Paul singing, this is Ringo singing, or whatever, and stuff. And so they're driving around, and Billy Bob says to his daughter, well, you know, John Lennon was a lot, you know, more experimental, avant-garde, and just sort of generally strange compared to the other Beatles. And then he says, there's this song on the White Album called Revolution Number 9. Now, if you've not heard Revolution Number 9, you need to pause this and go do that and then come back again. And the rest of this will make sense. It is a very strange piece of avant-garde art music. They were like listening to this very hip New York, you know, London composers that were just basically doing noise. People like John Cage. John Cage very famously did a whole piece which is nothing but musical rests. So you sit and the piano player sits at the piano and then reads one rest after another on all the measures of the sheet music, and then it ends and closes the piano. And this was very popular sort of in the 60s, and there's still an audience for this kind of stuff. In any case, like if you listen to Revolution Number 9, it's crazy. It's just basically like, I think it's John saying number 9, and then just backwards music and crazy crashing. And it's very long. It's hard to listen to. I'm kind of a fan of this stuff, but even this has no particular sort of emotional content. It's just very strange. Anyway, it's on the White Album, and no one ever plays this tune. Once you've heard it once or twice, you kind of want to skip past it, even if you're a big Beatles fan. Correct me if I'm wrong about this in the comments, but this is just my sense of things. So Billy Bob's explaining this song, and as he's explaining it to his daughter, she starts laughing because it sounds so ridiculous. And all of a sudden, it comes out of the car speakers on the radio. The satellite Beatles radio DJ is playing Revolution Number 9, which never happens. Like, no one ever plays that on the radio. That's just insane. And so he was utterly stunned by this. And it raises this question, like, he thought it was significant. I think it's very weird. Because if it was like, okay, here comes the sun, or, you know, Let It Be or something, of course, that just ends up being in rotation at some point, but not Revolution Number 9. And the fact that he was talking about it at that exact moment was very strange. I didn't know what to make of it. He didn't know what to make of it, but he sees it as part of a general mystical view of experience and of the world. So he's very much a kind of, not a devotee, but a fan of the paranormal. Okay, so this has probably happened to you. You're thinking about an old friend you haven't seen in years, and all of a sudden they text you out of the blue. Or you're reading about ancient Egypt, and the next day your neighbor like invites you to see an exhibit on mummies. Carl Jung had a name for this kind of thing, synchronicity. It wasn't a coincidence, according to Jung. It was something much stranger. So today, on Professor Asma's Guide to Unusual Knowledge, synchronicity. In the 1950s, Jung described synchronicity as, quote, an acausal connecting principle. An acausal connecting principle. In plain English, it's basically when two events are meaningfully related, but they're not connected by cause and effect. And for Jung, this wasn't just luck or random chance. It was as if the universe, the psyche, and the moment in time that we're sort of woven together in sort of create a meaningful pattern together. You think of it like the cosmos is sort of like winking at you or something. Carl Jung tells this story about seeing a patient, and this is a woman who is very rational and scientifically minded. And Jung, of course, like all psychoanalytic counselors, is getting her to talk about her dreams. And she's kind of going through the motions. It feels a little pro forma to her. She's not that into it, but she thinks, okay, I'll tell him my dreams. So she's sort of on the couch and he's sitting at his desk. window behind him, and she's telling him a story about someone gives her a scarab, which is a piece of jewelry that's shaped like the scarab beetle. And this was sort of popular in Egyptian aesthetics and the art of ancient Egypt. And so you'll see the scarab beetle. It's a beautiful looking beetle and people make jewelry out of it. A lot of people wear them around their neck or as rings. So the dream is about someone giving her a scarab. And then as she's telling this story, Jung hears this tapping on the window behind him, and he turns around and there's an insect sort of buzzing around at the window pane, and he opens the window and in flies an insect, and he catches it in midair, which is probably to me the highlight of the story, which is that Jung catches this insect in midair. I mean, try doing that. Anyway, I guess remember when Obama killed that fly? That was kind of another amazing bit of insect execution jujitsu. Anyway, so Jung captures this insect, and it turns out to be basically a beetle that's in the same genus as the scarab. So it's basically a scarab beetle, which never happened. They never came to the window. They never come in. They would sort of live in the sort of flower beds, out in the garden. So this flies in at the moment she's telling the story, and so she realizes this, and he shows it to her, and it's the thing that helps her sort of accept that her dream world is somehow relevant or meaningful for the waking world. So, he shows, here's your scarab, and it was so uncanny that it sort of broke through her kind of rigid worldview. For Jung, this wasn't just coincidence, it was the psyche and the world in a symbolic harmony. Jung thought that synchronicities arose when our inner psychological state matched outer events, tied together by meaning rather than cause and effect. So he leaned on the ancient idea of correspondences. This is a very old idea in Hermetic and esoteric philosophy. And really, it's not even Hermetic or esoteric. Before the scientific revolution, everybody thought in terms of correspondences. When two things happen together in time, it seemed very significant to anybody before the scientific revolution. And I think it still seems significant to us now. So basically, this idea of correspondences is that there's some connection between the microcosm, like us, and the macrocosm, the universe. And these two mirror each other. The famous esoteric or occult line is as above, so below. So Jung teamed up with a physicist, Wolfgang Pauli, who was interested in quantum indeterminacy. And they speculated together that there might be some principle beyond space and time linking mind and matter. This is sort of a wild cocktail of depth psychology, mysticism, and early quantum speculation. And when I first learned of this as a graduate student, I sort of dismissed it as being, a little too woo-woo for my taste. And I still don't know what to make of it. My skeptical mind thinks of these things as coincidences, whether it's the scarab beetle or Billy Bob's Revolution Number 9. But my more mystical side, my more mystical self, thinks that there is a sense in which there might be something to this. Now, of course, even if you believe in it, it's hard to know what the universe is trying to say to you, which is sort of why I like the idea that the universe is just sort of winking at you, like, I see you. That just amuses me no end. And I suppose somebody could sort of combine this together with their theological view that God is somehow involved in this. But even if you don't have a sort of traditional God, you might just think of the universe as having sort of consciousness. And maybe that is God. Okay. More than once, I've been sort of wrestling with some problem, some theory, something I'm confused about, and I'll pick up a book just randomly, and all of a sudden the solution will be there, like in the first paragraph I read, or like it will spark the thing I was looking for. And that kind of kismet, that cosmic sense of sort of magic is really fun. And you can either just sort of dismiss it as coincidence, or you can kind of relish in it and enjoy it. Some historical coincidences that are often trotted out is people will say, well, Lincoln's secretary was named Kennedy, and Kennedy's secretary was named Lincoln. And when you hear that, you're like, well, that's interesting. They were both assassinated, and what's the name connection? Although when I looked into it further, I found that that's kind of a mythology. I don't think that that was really the case. So there's a sense in which people who want this to be true, the synchronicity thing, might also be fudging it a little bit every now and then. So this is something that I want to keep in the back of your mind. There's an old phenomenon called the 100th monkey phenomenon. I don't know whether this is making the rounds on the internet, but before the internet, this was a very popular one, which said there's an island off the coast of Japan where these monkeys live, and the legend is that at one point, one of the monkeys went and washed its food in the water of the sea, and then ate it. And then another one did the same, and another, and eventually, like the legend is that once it had reached 100 monkeys who were washing their potato or their food or whatever, their tuber, whatever it was, in the sea, then all of a sudden it started to happen on another island. And so the monkeys there started to wash their food too in the sea. Now, I don't know what to make of this. I mean, for one thing, it's miraculous enough that monkeys and other primates can see each other doing behaviors and learn. So they're very good at learning from observation, and that's kind of one of the miracles of this. As for whether it could sort of happen via the collective unconscious, and there's some kind of mystical cosmic contagion to another island, I'm not sure. That seems, it's stretching it a bit for me, but it's the kind of thing that a Jungian or Billy Bob Thornton would be much more open to. And I think it's not something we should dismiss out of hand. So what are some of the problems then with Jung's idea of synchronicity? Well, one, we could say there's just statistical probability. In a world of billions of events happening daily, rare occurrences are bound to occur. So that's one way to explain some of these things. Confirmation bias is another way to explain some of this stuff, not all of it. We remember the hits and forget the misses. You notice when the song matches your thought, but not when it doesn't. I don't think that quite gets us out of the Billy Bob example, because that's a sort of uniquely rare and bizarre occurrence. And then I suppose another reason why we might critique the synchronicity idea is the kind of vagueness of it. Meaning is subjective, and what's significant to you might be random noise to someone else. I suppose their response to this, though, is, well, if someone's not seeing these connections and it seems like noise to them, they just might not be tuned in. In other words, the meaningful connections are there, but somebody else is not tuned into it. For example, I was walking down the street on my way to teach one day, and downtown Chicago, and they were doing construction on this building, and a piece of brick fell off the top of this building and hit the awning of the building that I was walking under, and it basically missed my head by like 3 inches and then shot off into the street. And I thought, oh my God, like I was right on the verge of getting this thing right in my head. I took the elevator up to my office and happened to meet a friend who was a professor there, was kind of a mystical type. And he said, oh, you look kind of shook up. And I said, yeah, this brick almost brained me. And he goes, oh, the universe is trying to tell you something. And I thought, at the time, well, what's it trying to tell me? And I was thinking, even if it is some significant event, it's unclear to me what the message is. So I was laughing like, well, I had cereal for breakfast. Is it trying to tell me, like, don't eat this cereal anymore? I was being kind of a dick. Oftentimes you find some more meaningful connection, like it must mean I should leave my wife, or it must mean I should marry the girl, or whatever it is. So there's a sense in which you, even if you think they're significant, you still have to find in what specific way they're significant. Again, this is why I like the idea that the universe is just sort of winking at you instead of basically giving you information. That idea fits better with the vagueness and the ambiguity of the sign. If you're looking for signs and wonders, it's still unclear what the message is, the takeaway is supposed to be. But there need not be a takeaway to signs and wonders. It might just be the sense that the universe has some kind of harmony or some kind of consciousness to it. So that's kind of a takeaway in itself. Lastly, one form of skepticism about synchronicity is that there doesn't appear to be any mechanism for it. That in cause and effect, you see that there's a communication of energy or motion. There's a kind of, one billiard ball hits the other billiard ball, and there's a kind of sense in which you can do science around the idea of cause and effect. But if there's no mechanism to these synchronous correspondences, then it's poetically beautiful, it's poetically interesting, but it's not testable, and it's not a scientific mechanism. Now, I think that Jung and other proponents of synchronicity are not bothered by this. It's perfectly fine to have a poetic view of nature and the world, and that's only adds value to life. And I'm actually sympathetic to this as well. But Jung's friend, Freud, was basically his kind of occasional sparring partner, and eventually they had a falling out altogether. Freud thought that Jung's mystical tendencies were just a little over the top, let's just put it that way. So whether you see synchronicity as cosmic guidance or psychological trick or a statistical inevitability, it's hard to deny the emotional power that we get from it, or the sense of emotional reassurance that these events give us. It makes us feel like the universe is not indifferent, that our lives are kind of stitched into a larger pattern. And this is common in what we would call sort of magical thinking. Now, I think all of us engage in magical thinking, even the sort of hard-nosed Bill Nye, Neil deGrasse Tyson types. They're still engaging in magical thinking. It's just that they're either not aware of it or bracketing that out when they do science, and that's probably all for the good. But maybe our minds are just great pattern makers, turning noise into narratives. Either way, synchronicity reminds us that the boundary between inner and outer worlds is much more porous than we like to think. So the next time the universe gives you a wink or a little nod, make sure you give it a little wink back.